When I was 3 years old, I remember playing a game of chase with my older brother. We were running around the house, just like kids do, and my brother decided to take the game to the next level. He decided to take his shirt off. He's like, this will make it that much more fun. So he took his shirt off. And about 10 seconds after he did that, I was like, that looks like so much fun. I'm going to do the same thing. So I took my shirt off as well, and we continued playing a game of chase. About maybe 5-10 minutes after that, one of my parents came into the room, and they looked around, and they saw what was going on, and they seemed confused. They turned towards me, scolded me to some extent, and told me to put my shirt back on instantly. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I had done something wrong. Then I waited for my parents to tell my brother the same thing, and they didn't. And my brother just lost interest at this point in the game of chase because we had got in trouble. I had got in trouble. And he went off and did his own thing. And I remember standing there as a 3-year-old with my hands balled up into fists, pulsing with anger, thinking, well, this isn't fair. That was the first time I buried a little bit of Faeiza. I remember being 6 years old, and I had a conversation with my aunt in a car, and she was telling me about all the potential suitors that I could one day choose from. I was 6 years old, and she was telling me about the arranged marriage I was going to have one day. I was like, great! I have all these options to choose from. Well, those options eventually became restrictions, but I lived by it. And Faeiza continued to bury herself. When I was 15 years old, I got engaged to one of those suitors. And I did so willingly, because that is all I ever knew. From the age of 6, I was told that my worth was tied to a marriage. I was told my worth was tied to another human being. And so, for a whole year, I was happily engaged to this individual. And then, reality set in. And what I should mention is that another thing that happened to Faeiza when she was 6 years old is she started the first grade, as most 6-year-olds do. And when Faeiza was in first grade, her first grade teacher, Mrs. Contrato, told her, she pulled her to the side actually in the classroom and told her one day, I just want you to know how smart and intelligent you are, and you will one day amount to something as great as an attorney, a doctor, or something even better. So I saw this as the curveball in my life, the curveball that no one expected. Because my parents, once again, valued my marriage more than they valued my education. And so as I was engaged, I soon realized that I was going to have to choose 2 paths in my life. I realized I was going to have to choose a path where I get married and I start having kids right away as soon as I graduate from high school, or I fight like hell and I get out of this engagement. Well, 10 years later, no ring on my finger. So I fought. I fought like hell. And I share this because it was a time in my life where I was listening to one thing and one thing only, and that was my heart. It was a time in my life when I felt everyone was against me. My parents, my siblings, my friends. Well, at that point, my friends didn't really know what was going on. I don't know how many high schoolers go tell their Caucasian friends, hey, by the way, I'm getting engaged. But I share these stories because this is what helped me first understand that I never got the chance to be me. That I grew up with so many societal expectations placed onto me. But I share it mostly because every single one of you in here also has those same expectations placed on you. They may look different. They may not be as extreme as mine, but you have them too. How many of you wake up every single morning and go to work from 9 to 5, come home, make your TV dinner, turn on Netflix, and repeat? Go ahead, how many of you do that? I like to think, sadly, that a lot of us are robots. We don't get to really understand ourselves. We are told that you have to work this way until you're 65. I used to work at Huntsman Cancer Hospital, and a lot of my clients there, they didn't start living until retirement. They were told to be robotic. But then by the time you're 65, that's when all the illnesses hit. And when do you actually get to really live? When do you actually get to see who's really under here? I want to share 2 other stories real quick. They're not mine. They're friends that I have recently met. I was sitting with a friend one night. He wants to go to school to become a social worker. He is African American from Brooklyn, and he looks like a stereotypical black man, like we would stereotype. Some would maybe say that he looks like he belongs in a gang. And we were talking, and he told me what he wanted to do, and I brightened up. I said, "You don't understand how many individuals you're going to be able to help in your community." And as we were talking, he all of a sudden changed the way he was talking with me. He changed his tone and he changed his accent. And I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I want to be taken seriously. And if I want to be taken seriously, I can't talk like this." And he has to do that every single day. He has to mute his personality. He has to change who he is. Another friend, a transgender woman, she heard me give a talk once about my mental health. I battled with depression for about 10 years. I used to cut. And the reason I used to cut is because when you go through so much emotional pain, as was my situation when I was engaged, sometimes you feel like you're starting to make the pain up in your head. And when that happens, you want to feel real pain because the emotional pain can't actually be truth. So this transgender woman I was talking to, she started crying and she told me, "I just want you to know that when I decided to take on my true identity and be who I really am, it was the happiest I had ever been. But the journey that took me there was so painful that most people don't want to go through it." So I'm in a really pivotal point in my life right now. I'm 25 years old. I live on my own, which is taboo in my culture. I am not married. I'm not engaged. I don't have a boyfriend, which is also not really good. Why aren't you married? All the Pakistani aunties see me and they come up to me and they say, "Beta, why aren't you married yet? What's wrong?" You know, as if there's something wrong with me. You know, society tells us a really big lie. They tell us that in order to be happy, we have to find that happiness in someone else. Yet I don't have anything that society says I should have. I barely have a career that's going for me. But what if I lose that in 10 years? What if I'm no longer a mental health therapist? Then what? Then who is Faeiza going to be? Because right now, Faeiza is just a mental health therapist. But that's what society says, and that's completely incorrect, because I'm going to tell you who Faeiza is. Faeiza is compassionate. Faeiza is loving. Faeiza cares so much about everyone around her. And yet everyone wants to put her into a box. And I tell you this because the journey that has taken me to get here has been extremely painful. It has been lonely. It has been isolating. And it feels like no one understands the pain that it takes to get here. And again, why do I share this with you? What does this have to do with anything to be your authentic self? Because at the end of the day, each and every single one of us are going to walk out of here living up to someone's expectations, except for our own. So you've got your mom's expectations, your dad's, your siblings, your employers. When do you actually get to listen to yourself and just be you? Have you ever looked inside? I have. And it's amazing. Because what's in there is love. And it's light. And it's that love that every single one of us try to find within someone else. But did you know that you are enough? Did you know you are worth it? Did you know that happiness you are trying to find is right here? Has anyone ever told you that? Has anyone ever told you that you're looking in all the wrong places? Has anyone ever told you that your compassion is not complete until it includes yourself? What do you do when a friend comes to you and they're torn up and they're going through a situation? You want to be there for them. But do you ever do that for yourself? No, you don't. Because it's too hard to be nice to yourself. It's too hard. For some reason, you're a failure. For some reason, you're not living up to it. For some reason, you're always disappointing someone. The other lie that we live is that we always expect things from other individuals. And we tie our lives to outcomes. We expect our wives to be there. We expect our dads to be there. We expect our children to take care of us when we grow older. That's a lie. How many of them are actually there? You come into this life alone, and you leave this life alone. If you can learn to be your own best friend, it'll save you a lot of heartache. And I'm not telling you to, go quit your jobs tomorrow and, go tell all your friends to screw off. That's not what I'm saying. They're there for you. But sometimes you just need to be there for yourself. It's the hardest thing to do. But when you do it, it gets so much easier. When you live your life through the pain that you have experienced, when you roll around it, you know how elephants roll around in mud? Yeah. You should roll around in your pain. And I know it's hard. It's really, really hard. But through the pain comes something so wonderful. Through the pain comes the path that you get to choose and not who someone else gets to choose from you, for you. So I'm going to give a Lion King reference now because I'm sure you've all seen The Lion King. I was watching The Lion King with two of my friends recently. And there's that part in Lion King where, Nala comes and finds Simba after, Scar scares him away and everything. And when she finds him, she challenges him and asks him, why are you running away from who you are? Why won't you look at who you are? What is going on? And he's in so much pain and everyone knows it, right? So then what happens? Then he meets Rafiki. And he meets Rafiki, and Rafiki hits him on the head with this little stick. And he says, what does he say? He says, basically, the past is in the past. Validate your past. Because every single one of us here have some sort of trauma. Every single one of us. We all walk around with trauma. But yet we act like we're fine. We cover our trauma up to the point where you just wear a mask every day when you go to work. Because another lie society tells you is that you need to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Sure, you do. But you don't have to hide anything. And that's why I wanted to come share my story with all of you guys, to hopefully give you the courage and strength to do the same. Because eventually, Rafiki leads Simba to that pond and he tells him to look. And you know, the first time he does it, he's like, nah, it's just my reflection. What's there? You know. But then the second time he does it, he sees something much deeper. He sees parts of his dad. He sees that he is meant to be a king. And he goes back home and he accepts that role. So, you are all kings and queens, aren't you? Suffering. And you allow your suffering to control you. Because what happens is, yes, something bad probably happened to each and every single one of us. But eventually, we become so attached to that suffering that we learn to live by it, because it's easier to suffer than to actually find happiness. Don't you think so? So, how many of you are ready to actually look inside? How many of you are ready to take the journey to find yourself? Because I'll tell you, my clients, the ones I see for therapy, they will all in 10 seconds tell me 10 things they hate about themselves. But when I ask them 10 things they like about themselves, they quiver with fear. I'm just asking them 10 things they like about themselves and they can't do it. I'm like, how could you possibly be so hard on yourself? You know, we live in scary times where we're divided, where we think that we're so misunderstood, and who are those bad guys out there trying to come in? But at the end of the day, when you learn to accept and love yourself, you will have a much easier time learning and accepting all of those around you. Thank you.